On a freezing Tuesday in April 1922, three men approached a lonely homestead in the Bavarian countryside. The farm, known as Hinterkaifeck, sat nearly a mile away from the nearest village. Hidden behind a veil of dark woods, the men were neighbors. And they were worried. The mail had been piling up for days. The young granddaughter, Chiselia, hadn't shown up for school. No smoke had risen from the chimney since Friday. As the neighbors approached the house, the silence was deafening. The farm dog was not barking. The chickens were quiet. They forced open the heavy barn doors. Inside, it was dark and smelled of livestock and old hay. At first, they saw nothing unusual. But as their eyes adjusted to the gloom, they noticed a strange mound of hay in the corner. A foot was protruding from beneath it. One of the men stepped forward and pulled the hay away. What he found underneath would haunt the region for 100 years. To understand the terror of Hinterkaifeck, we have to go back 6 months. The farm was owned by Andreas Gruber, a stern and difficult man who lived there with his wife, his adult daughter Victoria, and his 2 grandchildren. They were wealthy, but isolated. The neighbors didn't like them much, but they respected them. But inside the house, fear was taking root. 6 months before the tragedy, the family's maid had quit abruptly. She packed her bags in a panic and fled the property. She told anyone who would listen that the house was cursed. She claimed she could hear footsteps walking in the attic at night. She felt eyes watching her from the shadows. She told Andreas that the house was haunted. Andreas laughed at her and let her go. He didn't believe in ghosts. For months, the house was quiet. But in March 1922, the strange events began again. And this time, Andreas Gruber couldn't laugh them away. A few days before the discovery, a snowstorm blanketed the region. The next morning, Andreas went outside and froze. He found a set of fresh, heavy boot prints in the snow. They emerged from the dense forest and led directly to the farmhouse door. Andreas followed the tracks, expecting them to lead away or around the house, but they didn't. The tracks stopped at the house. There were no return footprints. Whoever or whatever had walked out of the woods was still inside. Andreas searched the barn, the shed, and the cellar. He found no one, but the feeling of being watched intensified. That night, the house keys vanished from Andreas's desk. A few days later, he found a newspaper on his porch, a paper from Munich that no one in the family had subscribed to. Someone was leaving clues. Someone was taunting them. Tragically, on Friday, March 31st, a new maid named Maria arrived at the farm. It was her very first day on the job. She had been hired to replace the woman who fled. She arrived in the afternoon, unpacked her things, and prepared for her first night at Hinterkaifeck. She likely never knew about the footprints or the missing keys. She had walked into a trap that had been set for months. When the neighbors pulled back the hay in the barn, they found 4 bodies stacked on top of each other like firewood. It was Andreas, his wife, his daughter Victoria, and the eldest granddaughter. They had been lured to the barn, one by one, and struck down with a matica heavy pickaxe used for farming. The neighbors, terrified, moved into the house. In the maid's bedroom, they found Maria, the new arrival. She had been killed in her bed, still wearing her work clothes. In the main bedroom, they found the youngest child, baby Joseph, in his bassinet. The violence was absolute. The entire bloodline had been wiped out in a single night. But as the police began their investigation, the case turned from a tragedy into a nightmare. The autopsy revealed that the family had died on Friday night, but the neighbors discovered them on Tuesday. The police found food remains on the kitchen table. The cattle in the barn were well fed and healthy. There was smoke coming from the chimney all weekend. The killer hadn't fled after eliminating the family. He stayed. He lived in their house for 3 days. He ate their bread. He slept in their beds. He kept the fire warm. He even went out to the barn to feed the cattle, stepping over the bodies of the owners to do so. The police realized that the footprints in the snow had been a warning. The killer had been living in the attic, watching them through the floorboards, perhaps for days or even weeks before he struck. He knew their routine. He knew where they slept. The killer was never caught. The motive, robbery, revenge, or madness remains unknown. The house was eventually demolished. The locals too terrified to live near it, but the story of Hinterkaifeck remains a chilling reminder. Sometimes the creak in the attic isn't the wind. Sometimes the footprints only go one way.